Have you ever been betrayed? I mean, that deep, gut-wrenching pain when someone you truly relied on just lets you down. It's a feeling we all know, and it changes us, right? It makes us want to build these huge walls and question everything. But what if I told you that your hesitation to trust again isn't some kind of character flaw? What if it's actually a super sophisticated biological defense mechanism? Okay, let's really dive into this. We're gonna explore the science of why betrayal hurts so much, and then we'll map out a clear, science-backed path toward healing. I want you to start by just picturing this with me. Imagine your trust is this beautiful, priceless, antique vase. It's one of a kind. And when you hand it to someone, a partner, a friend, a family member, you're asking them to hold something incredibly valuable. For a while, maybe they do, and you feel safe, you feel seen, connected. But then there's a moment. It drops, and it just shatters into 1,000 pieces. Now, even if you painstakingly glue it all back together piece by piece, you can always see the cracks. They're a permanent reminder of the moment it broke. It's such a powerful metaphor, and it gets right to the heart of why trusting again feels so perilous. So if that vase metaphor resonates with you at all, I want to start with the most important message of this whole explainer. Your caution, that hypervigilance, that fear of being hurt again, it is not a weakness. It's not you being broken. It is your brain doing its absolute #1 job, protecting you from a known threat. So we're going to shift the perspective here, away from any kind of self-blame and toward a really deep, compassionate understanding of what's actually happening inside your mind and body. Okay, so this brings us right to the core problem, this painful paradox that so many of us live with after a betrayal. It's this constant, exhausting battle between our deep-seated need for human connection and our equally powerful instinct for self-protection. Let's break down what that conflict really looks like. You know, this slide really lays it all out, this internal tug-of-war. On one hand, we are fundamentally social creatures. We are biologically wired to seek out connection, intimacy, a sense of belonging. These things aren't just nice-to-haves. They are absolutely essential for our well-being. But, on the other hand, our brain's #1 directive, which has been fine-tuned over millions of years of evolution, is survival. And a huge part of survival is just avoiding pain. So when the very thing we need, that connection, becomes the source of our greatest pain, our internal wiring gets all crossed up, and it leaves us stuck in this really difficult state of conflict. So what happens when we're stuck in that conflict? Well, we build walls. It's a totally natural response. We think, hey, if I don't let anyone in, I can't get hurt again. But these walls, they come at an incredibly high cost. They don't just keep out the pain, they also keep out love and joy and real connection, which can lead to this chronic loneliness. It is exhausting to be constantly on guard, scanning every little interaction for potential threats. Over time, we can lose our fundamental sense of safety in the world. And even worse, sometimes we start to internalize the betrayal, and we start believing that maybe we're just unlovable. Okay, so we get the emotional paradox, but why does it feel so physical, right? Why does a broken heart feel like a literal ache in your chest? Let's move on and really uncover the hard science behind that feeling. We're about to put on our lab coats and take a look at what is actually happening in your brain during and after a betrayal. This is truly fascinating. Neuroscientists, using fMRI scans, those big machines that let us see the brain in action, they've made this groundbreaking discovery. They found that when a person experiences social rejection or betrayal, a very specific part of the brain, called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or the DACC, it lights up like a Christmas tree. And here is the incredible part. The DACC is the exact same region that activates when you experience physical pain, like touching a hot stove or breaking a bone. So when you say it hurts, you are not being dramatic. Your brain is literally processing that emotional wound using the very same circuitry it uses for physical injury. And it's not just about brain regions, it's about chemistry. See, trust is fueled by this wonderful hormone called oxytocin. It's often called the bonding hormone or the cuddle hormone because it's released during moments of connection, hugging, deep conversations, intimacy. It makes us feel safe, it lets us lower our defenses. But when a betrayal happens, it's like a chemical car crash. The person who was once your primary source of that safety-inducing oxytocin suddenly becomes the source of a massive flood of cortisol, the stress hormone. Your brain experiences this violent chemical whiplash, not knowing whether to seek comfort from them or run for your life. This is the source of that intense, churning anxiety and instability you feel in the aftermath. Now, this chemical and neurological response, it doesn't just disappear, it leaves a mark. Our brains are learning machines, and a betrayal is a very, very powerful lesson. This brings us to the science of why it's so hard to let things go, and how wounds from our past, even from deep in our childhood, can cast a long shadow over our ability to trust today. You know, our fundamental blueprint for trust is really laid down in early childhood. Psychologists call this our attachment style. So, if your caregivers were consistent and responsive and loving, you likely developed what's called a secure attachment. You learned a core lesson early on. People are generally safe, and even when there are disagreements, relationships can be repaired. But if your caregivers were inconsistent or neglectful or unreliable, you may have developed an insecure attachment. Your earliest lesson was that relying on other people is dangerous and ultimately just leads to pain and disappointment. And where are these powerful early lessons stored? Well, they are burned into a part of your brain called the amygdala. The best way to think about the amygdala is as your brain's smoke detector, or its fear center. It has a long, powerful, and very detailed memory for anything it perceives as a threat. So if your early life has taught your amygdala that connection is dangerous, it becomes hypersensitized, always on the lookout for the slightest hint of a potential betrayal. And this leads to this intense internal battle whenever you try to trust someone new. On one side, you've got your rational, logical brain, the prefrontal cortex. It might be looking at a situation and thinking, okay, this new person seems kind. Their actions are matching their words. This feels pretty good. But at the exact same time, your amygdala, which is operating on old trauma data, is screaming at the top of its lungs, danger, red alert, this feels familiar. Remember what happened last time. Shut it down, run. That overwhelming feeling of panic or that sudden urge to sabotage a good thing, yeah, that's your amygdala trying to save you based on an outdated map. Okay, let's ground all this science in some real-world examples. Let's take infidelity. A partner has an affair. Immediately, your DACC fires up as if you've been physically assaulted. Cortisol floods your system. The person who was your source of safety is now a threat, and your amygdala goes on permanent high alert. Now every late text message feels like a potential new trauma. Or think about a workplace betrayal. A colleague steals your brilliant idea. This triggers a powerful unfairness response in your brain's reward circuits. It feels disgusting, a violation of social rules, and you build a professional wall that might end up holding you back. And finally, those childhood disappointments. A parent who repeatedly breaks a promise. This wires your brain for insecure attachment, creating a lifelong, often unconscious expectation that people will let you down, causing you to maybe push people away first to avoid the inevitable pain. Okay, I know that was a lot of heavy science about the problem, and it can feel a bit hopeless, but I promise you it is not. Understanding the mechanism is always the first step toward fixing it. So now we're going to pivot from the why to the how. And the solution, well, it might not start where you think. The journey of healing and learning to trust other people always begins with learning to trust yourself again. So let's look at the first two totally non-negotiable steps. Step one is you have to validate the pain. You must stop telling yourself or letting anyone else tell you to just get over it. Acknowledge the wound. Say to yourself, that was a terrible betrayal and it hurt me deeply. My feelings are valid. By doing this, you're sending a message to your amygdala that says, I hear you. The alarm is justified. We can turn it down now. Then, step two is about rebuilding self-trust. After a betrayal, we often doubt our own judgment. The key is to start small. Make tiny, consistent promises to yourself and keep them. Go for that 5-minute walk. Drink that 1 glass of water. Go to bed on time. Each tiny kept promise is like a little deposit in your self-trust bank account, proving to your brain that no matter what happens out there, you can rely on you. Once you've started to rebuild that solid foundation of self-trust, then you can begin to think about reconnecting with the world. But we're not just going back to the way things were. This is not about blind trust. This is about developing a whole new skill, the art of what we can call smart trust. Let's move to our final section and lay out a blueprint for cautiously and intelligently engaging with others again. So building this smart trust takes a bit of a strategy. Step 3 is to consciously retrain your amygdala. See, it's already an expert at spotting red flags. You need to become an expert at spotting green flags. Actively look for evidence of trustworthiness. Notice when someone is on time, when they keep a small secret, when their actions consistently match their words. You're building a new database of safety to compete with the old one. Step 4 is practicing smart trust. Trust is not an on-off switch, it's a dimmer switch. It's earned in drops, so don't hand over the whole precious vase at once. Hand over a small piece, see how they handle it, and then adjust the dimmer accordingly. And finally, step 5 is to completely reframe vulnerability. Choosing to open up after being hurt isn't weak or foolish, it is an act of profound, incredible courage. As we start to wrap up, it's so important to remember this. Rebuilding that bombed-out bridge of trust, whether it's with yourself or with someone else, it's not something you can just fix over a weekend. It is a slow, deliberate, meticulous process. It really is a feat of engineering, requiring you to perform some complex neurological rehabilitation on yourself. And this really gets to the true objective of all this hard work. The goal is not to build walls so high that you can never be hurt again. A life lived like that is a life of survival, not a life of thriving. The true goal is to cultivate such deep self-trust and resilience that deep in your bones, that if you get hurt again, you have the tools, you have the strength, and you have the self-love to pick up the pieces and heal. So I'll leave you with this one final thought to consider. After everything we've explored today about our brains, our pasts, and our deep need for connection, what does real courage look like to you? Is it braver to build impenetrable walls to guarantee you'll never feel that specific pain again? Or is it braver to lower them just enough to have a real chance at the one thing we are all wired for: true, meaningful connection?